Hello, YouTube. There are people who appear through our history that are truly enigmatic and are tremendously intelligent to the point of being genii and even out of their time and space. I could name Leonardo Da Vinci or Ivan Yefremov, but today I want to bring your attention to such a tremendously gifted individual from the 16th century, Cornelius Drebbel. A wooden submarine, an incubator, a perpetual motion machine, microscope, and much more. Cornelius Drebbel was a versatile person who gave impetus to the development of science in different directions. Drebbel was a Renaissance man whose inventions seemed to alter nature to his design. Cornelius Drebbel was born in 1572 into the family of a wealthy farmer Jacob Drebbel. The family lived in Alkmaar. Although the parents were wealthy, they did not give their son a good education, so he attended a Latin school where he acquired his primary education. At the age of 15, he moved to Haarlem, where he entered the academy and studied to become an engraver. His teacher was an alchemist. He taught Drebbel more than art. He also taught him the chemistry of the late 1500s. Drebbel set himself up as a maker of maps and pictures, but it was the material world that had its hold on his mind. Thanks to his teachers and perseverance, he mastered art well, and at the age of 20, the Dutch artist Hendrik Goltzius took him to be his apprentice. Drebbel loved to study, to learn new things, so at a young age he discovered a craving for alchemy and physics, which gave impetus to future inventions. At the age of 25, he marries his mentor's younger sister Sophia, and the newlyweds moved to Alkmaar. His wife lived large, so Cornelius had to work a lot. He managed to be an engraver, a cartographer, and an artist. At the same time, the young man begins to invent, and in 1598, at the age of 26, he received 2 patents for a water supply system and for a clock with a perpetual motion machine. 2 years later, Drebbel has the opportunity to bring his invention to life in the town of Middelburg. He builds a fountain and a sewer system through which fresh water is delivered. Also, there, Cornelius Drebbel learns how to grind lenses. Drebbel moved to London with his wife and daughters in 1604. And in London, the inventor gained the favor of King James and Prince Henry. The Drebbel family often took part in masquerades, some of which were in their honor. Also, that's where Cornelius Drebbel finally showed the world his watch, clock. Drebbel is famous. Many monarchs invite him, but he and his family moved to Prague. He lived well there for only 1 year, while Emperor Rudolf II was in power. Cornelius was made to be chief alchemist. After the emperor is overthrown, Drebbel, as his supporter, went to prison for a year. And in 1613, he came back to London. And that's where he started working on a submarine. From 1620s until his death in 1633, Drebbel lived with his family in London, working with microscopes, making theatrical props, and unsuccessfully trying to create torpedoes, sea mines, and explosives. He even had a plan to build a theater in London, but it didn't work out. He devoted himself to alchemy, in which he claims to have uncovered miraculous things and inventions of wonderful furnaces, among them that will maintain the fire at any degree of heat desired, whether hotter or colder, according to Nicolaus Claude Fabry de Percesque, one of Drebbel's correspondents in 1624. For the last few years, he had been living in poverty, running a small inn and draining the swamps in Cambridge. The entire small fortune of the great inventor, who was revered by monarchs of different countries, was divided by his 4 daughters. But let's get now back to the submarine. The generally accepted story was that at some time before 1619, Cornelius Drebbel came to England from Europe and worked on several projects for the Royal Navy, as well as carrying out independent scientific research. So Cornelius Drebbel became famous for his invention of a submarine. Unfortunately, the original drawing has not survived, but we roughly know how the boat worked. In 1621, Cornelius Drebbel demonstrated his invention to the royal courts and residents of London. This submarine was an improvement of the first 2 he had invented in 1620. It could, unlike previous versions, dive up to 5 meters and stay underwater for up to 3 hours. Even King James I dived into in that submarine. This is the first monarch to actually use the submarine, if we don't take into consideration Alexander the Great. Well, that's another story. The inventor and his team sailed from Westminster to Greenwich and back. The total itinerary was about 20 kilometers. According to paintings and verbal descriptions that have come down to us, the latest version of the submarine had 12 oars, while the previous ones had 6. The air probably passed through long pipes that reached the surface. His submarine, which was probably based on a rowing boat with raised and meeting sides covered in greased leather, was with a watertight hatch in the middle, a rudder and 4 oars. Under the rowers' seats were large pigskin bladders connected by pipes to the outside. Rope was used to tie off the empty bladders. In order to dive, the rope was untied and the bladders filled. To surface, the crew squashed the bladders flat, squeezing out the water. Cornelius Drebbel went on to build several submarines, each one bigger than the last. So, according to other notes I have, the final model had 6 oars and could carry 16 passengers. It was demonstrated to the king and thousands of Londoners on the Thames and could stay submerged for 3 hours at a depth of 15 feet. I believe this is a mistake because we already know about 12 oars. Anyway, there's some more thinking about how Drebbel maintained an air supply. It still remains a mystery. One diarist recorded that Drebbel had invented a chemical liquor, which he kept in a vessel aboard the sub. Drebbel explained the writer would, by unstopping the vessel, speedily restored the troubled air. The inventor also obtained oxygen by heating nitrate. Drebbel was a good alchemist, so he used this method. The hull of the boat was made of wood, covered with waterproof oiled leather. It was also used to seal the holes for the oars, so the underwater vessel could accommodate up to 16 people. The watercolor sketch you can see in the video was made long after the fact, which might explain why it depicts a 12-oar submarine, which, according to some, Drebbel never built. So we're not sure how many oars there were. But we have no contemporary representations at all of the Drebbel submarine in action or ashore. And that's too bad. The submarine is not the only invention of Cornelius Drebbel that has helped mankind or humanity. For example, at a young age, he invented this perpetual motion clock, which he showed to James the first 9 years later. It worked on pressure differences. Inside, he placed a thermoscope with a liquid level, the level of which changed with changes in pressure or temperature. These two parameters, albeit sometimes slightly, change throughout the day. Due to these minute changes, the float, which was on the surface of the liquid, oscillated and affected the clock drive, causing the hands to move. The clock also showed the lunar phase and date. Unfortunately, the drawing has not survived. He patented a pump and a clock. He invented a thermometer and a chimney. He created a new dye. It was a bright scarlet that came from a chemical reaction with tin. We talked about the perpetual motion machine already. Well, again, it wasn't that. It was actually a clock driven by atmospheric pressure changes. You never had to wind it. Cornelius Drebbel can also be called the founder of automation. He uses perpetual motion machine in chicken incubators. As the temperature increased, the air expanded. The mercury on the thermostat rose, affecting the mechanism that closed the damper. So when the temperature cooled down, the damper opened. In such an incubator, Drebbel's chicks and ducklings hatched without human intervention. Drebbel also invented a microscope with two convex lenses and improved the telescope of Johann Kepler's version. The Dutchman designed a camera obscura with a lens and the lens grinding machine. I already mentioned that he was able to obtain oxygen from the combustion of nitrate, and apparently this method is still used today. He also learned to oxidize sulfur to produce sulfuric acid. In addition, the scientist was able to cause lightning and thunder in laboratory conditions, created the first model of a planetarium, developed that sewer system with fresh water supply in Middelburg, drained swamps near Cambridge, and again, invented an air conditioning system. I've read that Drebbel's circulating oven, as historians of science call it nowadays, included an early thermometer with a heat scale. It regulated itself with a feedback control device that is a progenitor of the ubiquitous systems that regulate the air that people breathe nowadays and in various environments like offices, planes, and so forth. His oven is one of the earliest devices that gave humans control, it gave away human control to a machine, and thus can be considered to be a forerunner of the smart machine, the self-deciding automation, the thinking robot. Drebbel's oven also embodies basically a vitalist spiritual philosophy. He was really a master craftsman, but he wasn't really concerned about mechanical inventions. This was not his aim. Drebbel always claimed to have drawn his wisdom from nature, and he declared that he never read Latin or classical authors, or enriched his writing with ancient wisdom. He regarded inventions like his oven as a public demonstrations of the elemental forces of nature, earth, water, air, and fire. After King James I, who was keen to collect explorers, theologians, economists, and alchemists around him at court, after he died and Charles I became the king, Drebbel was employed by the Office of Ordnance, making secret weapons for the king, including apparently an unsuccessful floating petard bomb. Cornelius Drebbel died in London on November 7 of 1633. One modern scholar said that Shakespeare used Drebbel as a model for Prospero, his noble sorcerer, who ruled the mysterious island in the Tempest. The town Alkmaar, where Drebbel was born, still has plaques in places where he used to live. The Dolenveld proudly displays his bust. His name has often been used for institutions and streets. The town has its second Drebbel Society promoting the study of his life and works. As part of the annual historic manifestation, Kaskopinstad, a slightly downsized version of his submarine, was constructed. And those with keen eyesight can distinguish a crater on the moon bearing his name. The BBC commissioned the building of a replica of Drebbel's first four-oar submarine. This was built, very successfully tested, I understand, and reportedly is currently on display in Heron Square, Richmond upon Thames. Maybe. All this is so. I'm very much interested in people like Cornelius Drebbel, who have contributed so much to our knowledge, but at the same time remain basically enigmatic. And we can bring Roger Bacon and Isaac Newton as well. And there are some Russian inventors I want to talk to you about in the 18th century. Very enigmatic people who, it looks like they had time travel, because the inventions that they created were so much ahead of their time. I'll speak about them in the future. Thank you for your attention to my work. If you can support my work, please kindly do so through the links you'll find in the description to this video. Please tell others about my work. Please like my videos.